Red Dead Redemption 2 came out in October 2018 on consoles, and the PC version came out a little later in 2019. Despite being over 2 years old, the game is still very popular with a loyal fanbase. In fact, it's even been in the top 10 bestsellers list on Steam for a few weeks now. The main story alone will take you anywhere from 40 to 60 hours to complete. However, there's so many side quests and random encounters and things to do that you could easily clock hundreds of hours into the game. The game is set in the American West in 1899. You play as Arthur Morgan, a member of the Linde Gang. By 1899, the time of the Wild West and lawless cowboys was coming to an end. It was becoming harder and harder for men and women to live totally free, away from laws and governments. Gangs and outlaws were hunted down more ruthlessly than ever before by police forces and private agencies alike. Arthur Morgan and men like him are the last of a dying breed, and Red Dead Redemption 2 chronicles the life of outlaws after the glory days are far behind them. Just to warn you, there's going to be a few spoilers in this section. However, I will do my best to keep them to a minimum. The timestamps are in the description if you want to skip to the next section. So as I previously mentioned, you play as Arthur Morgan, who is part of the Linde Gang. The gang began as a Robin Hood type of group, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Whilst Dutch, the leader of the gang, still likes to see them that way, the rest of the members now see themselves as common criminals, a label that fits them well. At one time they may have helped the poor, but they certainly don't now. In fact, the main arch of the story is the slow moral decay of the gang. They begin to prey on the weak, more and more frequently, much to the dismay of many in the group. Where they used to only target what they viewed as greedy businessmen who had money to spare, they now target the poor through loan sharking and other such crimes. Arthur makes it clear he has no time for some of the newer members of the group, such as Micah Bell. Whilst a good earner and good with a gun, Micah Bell is a hot-headed, selfish, cold and untrustworthy character. In Arthur and Micah, you can clearly see what the gang was in Arthur versus what it is becoming in Micah. This shift in the gang is highlighted as Micah becomes Dutch's right-hand man later in the game, despite being in the group for a shorter period of time than other members, and also contributing far less than characters such as Arthur or John. It's this overall arching storyline the Rockstar Games nailed on the head perfectly. You feel Arthur's pain as he slowly starts to lose faith in Dutch as a leader and the gang's direction and purpose. This loss of faith is shown very realistically too. What I mean by this is Arthur's attitude changes subtly over time. For example, Arthur slowly starts to defend the actions of Dutch less and less, and eventually starts to openly question his decisions. Dutch notices too. In order to keep in Arthur's good books, he routinely appeals to Arthur's emotions by calling him son or something similar, a strategy that works for a time. Whilst not his biological father, Dutch raised Arthur, so their relationship is that of a father taking advantage of his son, an extremely complicated relationship to bring to life in a video game, but Rockstar pulled it off perfectly. To provide for the gang, Arthur does all kinds of jobs, from robbing trains to house robberies. As the game progresses, you are accompanied by many of the other gang members on various missions, such as John Marston from the previous game. The conversations that take place between Arthur and the various members of the gang do a great job at telling the individual characters' stories, as well as displaying their personalities. Many of the members have had difficult upbringings, often forcing them into a life of crime in one way or another. Others also join the gang for the acceptance and belonging it gives them. Rockstar Games did an amazing job at creating a whole cast of well-rounded, unique and interesting characters, which makes the game one of the most immersive I've ever played. The group aren't made out to be the good guys, or even anti-heroes. They're thieves, murderers and conmen, and yet, because you understand their past and how they came to be where they are, you grow to like them. It's almost like one of those movies where a lawman goes after a band of cold-blooded killers, but instead of being told from the lawman's perspective, it's told from the criminals. The last thing I want to mention for this section is the honour system. It's basically a scale that reflects on your actions in the game. If you play with honour, by giving money to the poor for example, or helping strangers, your honour rating goes up. If you play without honour by doing things such as stealing, then your honour rating goes down.
Come on! I will kill you, right?
Please, just take it and leave.
The higher your honour rating, the more perks you get, such as discounts in stores. Having a low honour rating does come with some perks too, such as getting better loot. Whilst the honour rating may seem trivial, it does have an impact on the end of the story, quite dramatically. I'm not going to say quite how though, as I feel that would be too big of a spoiler. Starting with the visuals, the game is really beautiful. The countryside has a real frontier feel to it, with the untouched environment, dirt roads, wild animals, and the rough and tough looking travellers you cross paths with. The houses are made out of cheap materials such as wood, and look as though they were built quickly, with practicality being the most important aspect. The countryside is in stark contrast with larger towns where the mood is much more civilised. The people in the towns dress in the latest fashions and live in stone buildings. On the streets of the larger towns, you'll often hear people protesting in support of social movements and engaging in polite conversation. The different areas of the map have a distinct feel to them. Wherever you are in the world, you can't help but get immersed, and this is due to how alive it all feels. There's lots of different clothing options to choose from, and whilst they are mainly just for show, you do have to dress in accordance to the weather to stop Arthur from getting too hot or too cold, which is a nice touch. There's some really unique items, like this headpiece, which you can only get if you hunted a huge £1,000 bear in a side mission. The weapons also look great. Not only is there a lot to choose from, but they're also highly customizable. You can upgrade your guns in various ways, which will help improve the gun's stats. You can also add engravings or even varnishes to them to make them different colours. This level of detail goes above and beyond what many would expect, but that's what makes this game so good, that it constantly breaks expectations. For me personally, the little details in the game is what tips the scales and takes it from a really good game to one of the best I've ever played. So there's lots of really cool little details that add another layer to the game and make it feel more real. There's a lot of unique animations in combat, your hair grows over time, and you also get increasingly dirtier as time passes, which means you have to shave and wash regularly if you wish to look the same. Overall, Rockstar Games has done a brilliant job with the visuals, to the point where I can't think of one thing that I didn't like from a visual perspective. So, moving on to the audio. I swear every one of the main characters has a voice that fits their personality perfectly. For example, Arthur and John's voices are deep and gravelly. They sound exactly how you'd think an outlaw in the American frontier would sound. Dutch, on the other hand, sounds charming and charismatic, exactly how you'd expect a leader to sound. There's a mixture of accents and languages spoken that show how diverse America is, and was at that time. When you're in the wild, you're surrounded by noises of birds and other wildlife. And when you're in a town, you overhear snippets of conversations and sounds of horse-drawn carriages being pulled on cobble streets. The music adds atmosphere but fits nicely into the background, so it doesn't take your attention away from the game. It should come as no surprise that I'm really impressed with the audio as well as the visuals. So in the game functionality section, I'm going to talk about how easy or difficult the game is to get to grips with, as well as the game mechanics and unique features. I don't really have much to say in this section because everything just works. The game is really easy to play, the combat is straightforward, the missions are fun to play and do a good job at slowly introducing you to new aspects of the game. One thing I really like about Red Dead 2 is the realism. You have to clean your weapons, otherwise they lose their effectiveness. You also have to keep your horse clean. You have to make sure Arthur and his horse eat, otherwise their stamina is affected. If you feed Arthur too much or too little, his weight will change. And if he gets too thin or too fat, he will be affected too. If you commit a crime in an area and you're recognised, a bounty is placed on your head, so your actions have consequences. For me, the realism helps with immersion so much, and it's another part of the game which just makes it so incredibly good. Taking realism to another level, fast travel isn't instantly available, and can only be done by upgrading the camp. Whilst you could do some side quests and earn some money and get the upgrade quite quickly, the likeliness is that most players don't unlock it until they've completed at least half of the main story. This then forces you to spend a lot of time riding from one place to another. Whilst at first I thought this might get boring, I was pleasantly surprised by how fun it was. There's a lot to do on your travels, from helping out strangers to hunting. So, is this game a buy or a pass? The visuals and audio are great. The story and time period is really interesting. It's without a doubt the most immersive game I have ever played. I can't think of one aspect of the game that I don't like, so obviously I'm giving this game a buy rating. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more game reviews and other gaming related content.